I'm Veronica Dudo. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, gone but not forgotten. Pope Leo XIV is back in Rome, but his presence is still felt in Africa. Twister terror, where this tornado touched down and the damage it caused. Plus, finding their voice.
We're proud of our brothers and sisters who are ready to stand by us.
How the U.S. ambassador to the Holy See is doing his part to help Christians in Nigeria. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the feast day of Saint Fidelis of Sigmaringen. Our top story tonight, Pope Leo XIV has returned home from Africa. Reflecting on his trip, the Holy Father says he left with an immeasurable treasure of faith, hope, and charity, shaped by the encounters, testimonies, and experiences he gathered throughout the visit. EWTN Vatican journalist Benedict Sedegren shares some of the highlights of the Holy Father's longest apostolic journey so far.
Pope Leo XIV has concluded his apostolic journey to 4 African nations, a visit that brought him face to face with very different realities across the continent. In his first stop in Algeria, a call for peace quickly emerged as the defining theme of the trip. Amid stops at the Presidential Palace and the Great Mosque of Algiers, Pope Leo described himself as a pilgrim of peace, including at the Martyrs' Memorial.
In this place, let us remember that God desires peace for every nation.
Throughout his visit, the Pope stressed that the future belongs to men and women of peace, like at the elderly home run by the Little Sisters of the Poor.
Our Father's heart is not with the wicked, the arrogant, or the proud. God's heart is with the little ones, with the humble, and with them he builds up his kingdom of love and peace day by day.
One of the highlights of his visit to Algeria was a moment of prayer at the archaeological site of Hippo in the modern-day city of Annaba, the home of his spiritual father, St. Augustine. The Holy Father continued to spread his message of justice and peace in Cameroon, a land marked by violent conflict, a deepening food crisis, and widespread poverty.
I am here to proclaim peace.
With local leaders, the Pope released 7 doves as a sign of a shared desire for peace. Throughout his visit in Cameroon, the Holy Father spoke about the many challenges facing the region, like the exploitation of the land and its resources, violent conflicts, and corruption. In one of the largest gatherings of his African trip, where 120,000 people joined him for Mass at the Japoma Stadium, the Pope urged them to not give in to discouragement.
Do not forget that your people are even richer than this land, for your treasure lies in your values: faith, family, hospitality, and work.
In Angola, the Pope visited the Marian shrine of Mama Mushima, one of the country's most important pilgrimage sites, to pray the Rosary with tens of thousands of faithful.
Mother of the Heart, we come to you to offer you everything.
Following a visit to a nursing home and an encounter with the country's Catholic clergy, Pope Leo ended his visit to Angola with a final Mass in Saurimo. Pope Leo gave the 60,000 faithful some reassuring words.
In the face of these evils, Christ hears the cry of the people and renews our history by lifting us up from every fall.
In Equatorial Guinea, a predominantly Catholic nation, Pope Leo was greeted with overwhelming joy and enthusiasm. Amidst meetings with representatives from the world of culture, staff and patients at a psychiatric hospital, and the country's faithful, Pope Leo urged all to continue spreading the gospel like the first missionaries did 170 years ago.
Do not be afraid to proclaim the gospel and bear witness to it with your lives.
As song and dance filled the courtyard of Bata prison, the Pope shared a powerful message with inmates, staff, and prison pastoral workers.
No one is excluded from God's love. Each of us, with our unique stories, mistakes, and sufferings, remains precious in the Lord's eyes.
While the Pope's journey has revealed very different realities, the Pope's message of peace, justice, and hope has resounded with clarity across all nations. And so has his praise for what they share, a faith that endures. In Rome, Benedict Cedergren for EWTN News Nightly.
Many of our EWTN journalists were on the ground during the Pope's trip to Africa, including ACI Africa Editor-in-Chief Father Don Bosco. He described how the Holy Father was received during his visit.
The level of public enthusiasm has been great and quite striking. In each of the 11 locations he visited, the scale of participation has been immense. The singing, the dancing, the use of traditional instruments and other expressive gestures, which are characteristic of many African liturgical and cultural gatherings, created an atmosphere that reflected extensive preparations. The reception was not only limited to large-scale numbers of ordinary faithful. It also involved coordinated efforts at both church and state levels.
Joining us now in the studio is Dr. Matthew Bunson, Vice President of EWTN News and author of Leo XIV, Portrait of the First American Pope. Always a pleasure to have you here.
Always.
So first, what is your initial response to the Pope's visit? Do you think it was a success? And if so, in what way?
Well, I think Pope Leo is very clear in how he's assessing this trip too. And that is that he traveled as pastor. Yes, there's a lot of diplomatic dimensions to this, but he, as he said in the presser coming back from Africa to Rome, he saw this as his role as a pastor of fulfilling his task of evangelization, proclaiming Christ Jesus, proclaiming the dignity of the human person. And from that standpoint, I think it was, we hate to use terms like success or failure, I think it was an immense success. But it also gave us a very clear picture of what he's like sort of on the road for a long trip. The level of energy that he brought to it was really quite extraordinary. And we're seeing and appreciating even more fully his capacity to proclaim and preach in multiple languages. He spoke 4 different languages on a regular basis throughout.
And for so many people, hearing English was, of course, wonderful and very understandable. Now, in his address to the members of the diplomatic corps accredited to the Vatican in January, Pope Leo drew heavily on St. Augustine's City of God, namely the idea of the heavenly city and the earthly city. How was the City of God's influence on Pope Leo shown during his visit to Africa? Yeah,
well, you could see it in some ways in each of the 4 countries, creating that contrast between the need for good governance, which is something he talked about in Equatorial Guinea, the need for the authentic justice, which he talked about in a place like Cameroon, the need for dialogue, which he talked about in Algeria. I was especially struck, though, in his visit with President Mbasogo in Equatorial Guinea, where he made that contrast very specific in terms of good governance, in terms of authentic justice. But then it wasn't simply a series of principles. He demonstrated what the City of God actually looks like. He went from there to the Jean-Pierre Ollier Psychiatric Hospital, where we can see the City of God is a city of love. It is a place of love. So this was a place of love. Then he goes to Bata Prison, where, again, he talks about God's loving mercy, laying out the vision for what a good society can look like, in contrast to what we see in different parts of Africa, unfortunately, of poor governance and an unequal distribution of resources and inauthentic justice.
And of course, we were following along with EWTN's coverage, and to see the prisoners dancing and having the flags was really a striking moment. Yeah. Dr. Matthew Bunson, thank you so very much.
Great to be with you.
It appears peace talks are back on, at least for now. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters today that President Donald Trump is sending Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner back to Islamabad, Pakistan, saying the Iranians want to talk in person. Iran's top diplomat is reportedly also heading there. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
That's right, Veronica. Lots of news headlines on this Friday. On the North Lawn, the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters President Trump is always willing to give diplomacy a chance, and they're hopeful. Take a listen.
Steve and Jared will be heading to Pakistan tomorrow to hear the Iranians out. We hope progress will be made, and we hope that positive developments will come from this meeting, and we will see.
Caroline Leavitt says the President, Vice President, and Secretary of State will remain in the United States for updates, with the Vice President on standby, who might be dispatched to Pakistan if the administration feels it's a necessary use of his time.
We've certainly seen some progress from the Iranian side in the last couple of days.
As the world waits to see what happens next, much of it remains on edge over a war that has snarled crucial energy exports through the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, good morning.
At the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth told reporters the U.S. blockade is ironclad, adding it grows more powerful by the day.
Now, as usual, there's a lot of false information out there. I'll say this, every ship that the U.S. believes meets our criteria, either Iranian ships or to and from Iranian ports, has been turned around. As of this morning, 34 total. Non-Iranian vessels are allowed to transit.
Hegseth declared the blockade is tightening by the hour, telling the Iranian regime,
"We are in control, nothing in, nothing out."
In Europe, concern that Iran could become even more dangerous and pose a greater threat if there are some empty chairs at the talks.
If the talks are only about the nuclear and there are no nuclear experts around the table, then we will end up with an agreement that is weaker than the JCPOA was.
In addition, President Trump extends the Jones Act waiver. The goal, stabilize energy prices by making it easier for non-American vessels to transport oil and natural gas in the wake of the war, and for more ships to travel to the U.S. following the closure of the Strait of Hormuz.
Tonight, President Donald Trump attends the RNC Spring Retreat in Florida. And then tomorrow he's back here in the nation's capital. He'll be sitting down with lots of journalists, including myself, just down the road from here at the annual WHCA dinner, and we're told his speech will be very entertaining. Veronica?
Owen, I understand that was the press secretary's last press gaggle for a while?
Yeah, for a while. She has good reason. As you may know, she is pregnant and about to give birth. In fact, she said any minute now. So very exciting for her, and we congratulate Miss Levitt and her family. Veronica?
Thanks, Owen. A controversial redistricting referendum approved by voters in Virginia has been ruled unlawful by a circuit court judge. The referendum was passed by a razor-thin margin on Tuesday, giving the Democrats the upper hand. However, the judge ruled with Republican groups who had sued the state to stop the redistricting effort. So as of right now, Virginia districts will remain the same. Here to break it down for us is Ilya Shapiro, Senior Fellow and Director of Constitutional Studies at the Manhattan Institute. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you.
This ruling seems to have taken many in the state by surprise. What was it based on?
Well, we were expecting litigation. The referendum had already been challenged beforehand. The Virginia Supreme Court said it was too early to rule, and so let the vote take place. And the judge ruled on irregularities in how the amendment referendum was proposed by the legislature. You have to cross the T's and dot the I's in terms of number of times you pass an intervening election, timing, venue, lots of complicated legal things, and also how the referendum wording was stated. If you voted, I'm a Virginia voter, and it seemed confusing to me, or misleading at least, that it said that do you support restoring fairness to our elections? Something like that, the judge said, was a bridge too far.
As you mentioned, litigation was expected. So in your opinion, what happens next? Will the Democrats appeal, and could we see this case end up in front of the Supreme Court?
Virginia's Attorney General has already said that he will appeal to the state Supreme Court. That's the next step. And the state Supreme Court is now in a bit of an awkward position. Will it really, even if it thinks that the referendum violated the law, violated the state constitution, will it set aside the election that was already held? My legal analysis agrees with this lower court judge that just ruled. But will the state Supreme Court go against the legislature, which in Virginia is the body that actually picks the Supreme Court justices?
What do you think the timeline is for this?
Fairly quickly. Obviously, it's an important thing, and there have to be primaries and the general election this year for Congress. So the Virginia Supreme Court, I think this is going to be their number one priority.
Well, this is certainly not over yet. We'll continue to follow it. Ilya Shapiro, thank you so much.
One more thing is that if the Virginia Supreme Court rules, that probably is the end of the story, because the U.S. Supreme Court is not going to get involved in state constitutional law.
Fantastic. Thank you. We have a lot more still to come on EWTN News Nightly, fighting human trafficking. A new take on a vital old bill that is gaining bipartisan support on Capitol Hill. 25 years ago, Congress made sex and labor trafficking federal crimes. Now, a group of lawmakers want to pass an updated version to better protect survivors and potential victims. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more. Eric.
Good evening, Veronica. The legislation is named after former slave and 19th century civil rights leader Frederick Douglass. House Pro-Life Caucus Chair Congressman Chris Smith, who is Catholic, is pushing for a major overhaul of the measure. He led a coalition of lawmakers who rallied at the Capitol with sex trafficking survivors and victims advocates. Congressman Smith said it's their experiences that is behind the writing of the new bill.
This legislation is of, by, and for them to help heal, restore, and to empower. And it created the U.S. government's whole-of-government approach. Scores of new programs and initiatives to combat human trafficking both here, domestically, as well as overseas.
Government data shows a reported 31% increase in child trafficking victims in 2024. Congressman Smith says the bill seeks to improve prevention and victim protection by helping human trafficking survivors find counseling, jobs, housing, and other services, and provides school grants for training teachers and students to prevent exploitation. Survivors spoke about the consequences they face and how the system needs to recognize who needs help.
In my own experience, I was not identified as a victim. I was treated as a criminal. Like many survivors, I was arrested, detained, and punished for actions that were a direct result of my exploitation.
The new bill would provide $31 million to the Department of Health and Human Services to support victims of human trafficking.
Traffickers are not waiting. They're using technology, they're using relationships and moments of vulnerability to exploit individuals wherever they are. That is why prevention education matters.
Congressman Smith tells me the new bill has 23 co-sponsors and adds House Speaker Mike Johnson told him the bill will be brought up to the House floor for a vote in the next few weeks. I'll stay on top of it. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
At the U.S. Embassy to the Holy See in Rome, a special conference was recently held focusing on the plight of Christians in Nigeria. It was organized by the group Solidarity with the Persecuted Church. EWTN News' Ishmael Adibua has more.
We are excited to bring together Holy See officials.
Ambassador Brian Bursch, the U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, says what is happening in Nigeria is horrific, but he praised President Donald Trump's efforts to address the situation.
Christians are being targeted because of their faith, and targeted at a scale that is appalling, according to the President of the United States. The President has said that Christians face an existential crisis in Nigeria, and thanks to his leadership, he is now acting to bring an end to this.
Still, others say more must be done to improve the plight of the Nigerians.
The U.S. government needs to do everything it can to encourage the Nigerian government to take care of its people, to provide security and a basic rule of law.
So, if the U.S. could help the country in fixing its leadership and also strengthening and fixing, they are the two words, then I think it is going to be very important.
Clergy and church leaders have also expressed their concern, and even Pope Leo has recently called for the peace and safety of the Nigerian people.
It is with sorrow and concern that I have learned of the recent attacks against various communities in Nigeria. I express my closeness in prayer to all of the victims of violence and terrorism.
At the time of the conference, Pope Leo XIV was on his apostolic journey to Africa. And though he did not travel to Nigeria, those at the conference say the Holy Father's show of solidarity with the African faithful spoke volumes to Nigerian Christians.
So the message of the Pope to these churches and these populations is also going to be a message to the population in Nigeria, to the church in Nigeria.
He's spending time in 4 different countries, not in Nigeria, but I think many of the issues he is addressing are shared and are common in Nigeria.
Leo's visit to Africa was a source of inspiration for the entire continent. Nigerian Christians, together with the United States, hope that his visit will also spur greater efforts to preserve religious freedom for them and for other Christians suffering persecution around the world.
Fortunately, we haven't had a voice to be heard, but we are proud for all those who have stood by us all these years. And now we have a platform where the voices of Christians who are persecuted can be heard. And we are proud of our brothers and sisters who are ready to stand by us in our situation.
In Rome, Ishmael Adibwa for EWTN News Nightly.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, damaging disaster. A tornado rips through northern Oklahoma, causing widespread damage. Plus, why the mysterious disappearance of several scientists had led to a congressional probe. In Oklahoma are clearing debris after a powerful tornado damaged at least 40 homes, ripped roofs off, and even reduced buildings to rubble.
Yo, it's coming right at us.
The most extensive damage was in the rural town of Enid in Garfield County. At least 10 people were injured. Fortunately, no deaths have been reported. According to the mayor, some people were trapped in their homes and had to be rescued after the tornado barreled through the area. A conspiracy theory regarding UFOs continues to gain national and now federal attention. A congressional probe is underway to investigate the disappearance of several scientists and military personnel connected to sensitive U.S. research. We asked some lawmakers about the situation.
Imagine if 12 newscasters across this country, 12 rabbis, 12 barbers, 12 used car salesmen disappeared. They walk out of their dadgum houses, they don't carry their identification, and they're gone. And a couple of them have said just days before that they're not suicidal. To me, that sends a very chilling effect out there.
You know, there are 10 or 11 or so. I don't know how many missing, but I hope that the FBI, and I have a great deal of love and respect for Kash Patel, and I think we got to get to the bottom of this, because it's not one or two. You're talking 10 to 12. How do you just end up missing? How do you just, like they vanish? That's a concern. We should get to the bottom of it.
Serious problem. We're going to have to find out where they are, who killed them, why. It's a serious problem.
Joining us now to try and make sense of it is UFO researcher John Allen Stewart. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you for having me.
John, you've been studying the so-called UFO phenomenon for over 20 years now. What is going on with the deaths and disappearances of these 12 scientists, and should we be worried?
Well, you brought me on here to be honest, and I am here today to break this hysteria that is going on about this mythic list of scientists that were unalived and murdered. And I can tell you that a majority of the list are anything but that description. This list was done by UFO promoters. It was packaged by the Daily Mail, and then it was amplified by Joe Rogan. And I'm just telling you the truth. I am telling you, as I sit here on your program today, that this is moving towards a modern day Salem witch trial. And we're just waiting for the Reverend Noors to come out and proclaim, the United States government is the devil. And I am sitting here calling for calm, calling for rationale. Other than two people on this list, which we'll talk about, this list was not a list of people that were murdered by the United States government. I'm sorry, but I am telling you the truth.
So I think one of those people could be retired Air Force General William McCaslin. Can you tell us about anything he was doing related to secret UFO research?
Well, I can tell you what he did, before he retired, and I have it written down here. He was the director of special programs. I cannot stress enough what this means to the layperson that doesn't know the inside DOD jargon. He was executive secretary for SAPOC, which was the Special Access Oversight Committee. Folks, I'm just here to tell you, from my 30 years of investigating the UFO program, we knew of this man in 2015 and 16. He literally sat at the desk, sat at the head of the legacy program, the UFO program. Not only allegedly was he helping to reverse engineer captured UFO non-human intelligent craft, he was help building them. And we've heard from numerous whistleblowers that acknowledge that McCaslin sat at the top of that pyramid, was one of the gatekeepers of the United States Air Force Special Access Program of Special Technology. And I'm sorry, this man was in control of trying to reverse engineer non-human intelligent craft that we recovered since 1945. And you could take that to the bank.
John Allen Stewart, thank you.
Thank you.
We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, YouTube, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Veronica Dudo. Good night and God bless.